Okay, I guess I'll get started. Wow, those were some great talks today, and it is really tough following up those talks. I am going to talk a little bit about ICSI overall over the 20 years, but I did want to make this a personal retrospective, so a lot of it has to do with the group that I began with people like Jim Beck and Joachim Baer, which was the realization group, and then end up with ICSI, a place for us. You'll see what I mean. This is something that Dave Johnson dug up. Thought it was kind of interesting to look at. This was the first purchase order for workstations that we were able to find. These were, it's a little hard to see back there maybe, but these were Sun 360s, and they were on the order of a couple MIPS. And they were $9,000, $7,000, and so forth. So orders of magnitude since then. But those were the first, the first purchase order we were able to find was from 1987, which was before we moved into this building. In fact, before I was part of the Institute, or Jerry was for that matter. So just a little bit on ICSI accomplishments in brief. Certainly from my point of view, staying alive. We had this very wonderful core funding from Germany and also to some extent from Italy and from Switzerland for the first 10 years. And so everything else could build around it. We could get federal grants and so on. And that went away. And it wasn't a big surprise, or they didn't drop us because of some problem. But it was known from the beginning that it would be 10 years. And so there was a couple very rough transitions afterwards. We had 3 years where we were saved by primary industrial support, primarily from AT&T and from Intel, and Scott Schenker was instrumental in bringing that in. And then that went away with the dot-com bust, and not just dot-coms busting, but lots of industry busting. And so then we had 7 years of winging it. Looking back, I actually went through all the old revenue charts, and it was about $120 million that we've spent over the last 20 years. So it's a lot of money, and you'd like to think something good came out of it. I think from the talks today, you got an idea that some good things did come out of it. The key to it was, well, first off, location. It wouldn't have worked if we weren't sitting here by a great university. But also maintaining great staff and having high standards, the kind of things that Jerry talked about earlier. So we had many people come through here, somewhere over 1,000 staff and visitors, senior visitors, postdocs, and so on coming through. There's some statistics, it's not uniformly clear for all the different visiting programs, but from the German program in particular, we have pretty good statistics. And it's a very high number moving on to very good positions, both in industry and academia. And there's the usual thing of gazillions of publications and lots of awards and specific research accomplishments. So I just have a few slides about some of the things from the different groups. I think the talks today were really more effective at conveying this than anything I could say now. But just first place, you heard talks about Sather and mentioned about pSather. These were things that really had big impact on Java and on Google and VMware. There was all this work that happened out of the AI group in neural modeling, models of language and learning, and the FrameNet activity, which is still affecting things quite a bit. A lot of work in cognitive science, groundbreaking work, science papers, and so on, in human color processing. That's Paul Kay. And the Information Society kinds of things. The Berkeley Center for the Information Society, connection with the formation of Citrus. It was actually a very important part, I think, of the formation of Citrus on campus, and something that's still going strong. The Berkeley Foundation for Opportunities in Information Technology, which is a program that comes out of ICSI to work with underrepresented minorities and women, encouraging their moving forward, high school students, and to some extent with junior high school students, encouraging them moving forward in information technology. So that really all came out of initially Jerry Feldman's group. The algorithms group, which are over the years Dick Karp and earlier Mike Luby. Seminal theoretical work, and again, if you were able to see Dick's talk this morning, that will explain all this stuff much better than I can. But basically, there was the work that was just core theoretical work in computational complexity, such as, I remember Lenore Bloom working on computational complexity for reals. online algorithms and randomized algorithms. There were these codes that were developed by Mike Luby and friends for digital fountain work, and distributed hash tables, which was developed jointly with a networking group, useful, I think, in overlay networks. Algorithms for genemic analysis, that work is still really going on. And of course, it had Dick Karp in it, and so various awards came, and most recently the Kyoto Award, which is very much like Japan's version of the Nobel Prize. The networking group, very accomplished group. First decade, the Ferrari years, first provable performance guarantees for real-time traffic, some of these things that Domenico spoke about in the video this morning, and they actually implemented real-time protocol suites. That was, even though he commented on these protocols not being in use, clearly they affected the work in many places. And the most recent decade, initially the AT&T Center for Internet Research at ICSI, and later after AT&T went away, just the ICSI, the Internet Center, the ICSI Center for Internet Research. The Open Router platform was developed here. That's been, is being used by many people, and two spin-offs have come from that. The distributed hash tables I mentioned. You heard Vern's talk, hopefully, about the intrusion detection systems. That's gained widespread use. Seminal work on architecture and congestion control. These folk were very involved in the community, in the internet community, in the IETF and IRTF and so forth. And they too got a bunch of awards. Sally Floyd and Scott Schenker both got the SIGCOMM Award, and they also got the IEEE Internet Award. And Vern Paxson got the Grace Murray Hopper Award and the Internet Test of Time Award. So, and they're very high up in citations and so forth. It's really been a fantastic group. And I'm not really speaking about the newest groups because it's a historical thing, so I'm not talking about the vision group yet, Trevor, or the architecture group, except in the sense that it's the rejuvenation of aspects of the realization group, as Krista was speaking about. So some of this is a bit repeated from Krista's talk, but with less technical detail. The ring array processor that he mentioned. Krista did mention that, as with the SPIRT, this was sold to a number of customers. I just want to mention that these customers were actually people that we were collaborating with in our speech research. And so it was this incredible way, instead of just having common software that you'd give to a bunch of colleagues who were working together, you had common hardware, common specialized hardware, and common low-level software, and so forth. So this greatly accelerated the collaboration, much of which was US to Europe. And then the torrent chip, which was, as far as we can tell, the first single-chip vector microprocessor, which Krista was the lead on, was very successful after he kicked me out of the meetings. Then, yeah, that was, Jim Beck and I dug up some email about this at one point, and we found there were 2 years of email where Krista was saying it would be done in 2 months. Which held me off for another couple months coming to the meetings. And of course, we developed speech recognition methods. Hervé Boulard and I developed the Connectionist hybrid HMM, hidden Markov model, multi-layer perceptron methods that many people have used around the world. Hina Kermansky and I developed the relative spectral analysis method, RASTA, which went out into millions of cell phones, partly thanks to the interest of Hargar Dadri, who's sitting back there from Qualcomm. The Berkeley Restaurant Project, or BERP, was this project in which you would say, I want to eat some Chinese food, I don't want to have to go too far. It was what was called a mixed initiative system, so it wasn't just the system saying, please fill in this thing, please fill in that thing. You could initiate things that were different than what the machine wanted, and it would follow it. And Dan Drafsky was very involved in that. More recent methods, we really focused on speech recognition as the application for the first 15 years, but the last 5 years it's really expanded out with people like Deleka Conitour, who's with the group now. Things like speaker and sentence segmentation, speaker recognition with conversational keywords. I'll just say a moment about that. The idea is that rather than just having speaker recognition that is text dependent, in which you must say a particular phrase, or speaker recognition that's text independent, in which you pay no attention to the words particularly, but you try to pick out something about the average characteristics of the vocal tract, for instance. You have something where you recognize some words, and you take some words that are very common, you can build up models for those words and get some of the benefits of each. Speech understanding work, a number of students and visitors and Delec are working in summarization. And something that's still very, it's of great interest to me is what we call multi-stream discriminant speech recognition, which is trying to copy not the details, but some of the ideas from our limited understanding of how the human brain and how mammalian brains in general process sounds. So the realization group was the original name of this group. It was the precursor to the original speech group. And speech processing was the key application, but really initially the focus was mostly on the kind of things that Krista was talking about, plus the neural network studies accompanying it. Over those years, we graduated 10 PhD students, had many visitors come through. You've already heard about these two main systems, the RAP and the SPERT. And there were two major speech directions. The neural networks, this was coming out of the work that Hervé and I did on that, and the feature extraction, which initially very much came out of the work that Hina Kermansky and I did. So now I want to go into a part where I'll give you a few sights and sounds from this period. There will be some overlap with some of the earlier talks because people had access to some of the same pictures. Maybe oh, this one's different. This is the three of us preparing to share our wisdom with students. This is Hina Kermansky there, and our friend Hervé over there, and a younger, darker-haired me. And speaking of the hair, yeah, I know that Hervé's caption on this was something about how much work we had. It didn't have anything to do with how much work we had. This is what my desk always looks like. Okay, Chuck Wooters was our first student. Those of you know him, boy, yeah, I wish he was here, but. Jim Beck, sorry Jim, I couldn't resist the Ace hardware thing. Jim was just the best hardware guy. We were so lucky to have him for the RAP boards and SPERT boards. He also did the boards for the original RISC chip with Dave Patterson before he came to us. Incredible guy, and he's right here. You've seen this picture before. It's just bigger, I think. Yeah, we do look pretty young. Jeez. Oh yeah, this was Hervé in a bit of trouble. This was a pretty good story, actually. I had to take a moment to tell it. Hervé was working for this nameless, horrible company called Lernout and Houseby, and he was getting ready to leave, and they told him that he could leave, but by his contract, he had to actually stay at his desk for months in this horrible, six months with this horrible environment. So he told me about it, so I ran off to the costume store and I got this stuff and shipped it off to him overnight. And so he came to work and sat there right on the path of where customers could see him. And very shortly they said, you know, you can work from home. You've seen this picture before, just to give some names. This is Steve Reynolds, who's here somewhere. Steve is back there, yeah. Who's currently heading up CSTR, this great lab at Edinburgh. Andreas Stokke, who never seems to have been able to get away. Is he still? Oh, he got away. Okay, but anyway, no, he moved to SRI after he got his PhD, but then he ended up moving his office here. And there's Krista. Yeah, it's Krista. This is Phil Cohn, who's a guy who was very influential in the early, he wrote a lot of the early software for the RAP machine that we had. There's a younger Jim and a younger me. There's Chuck, and that's David Bailey, who was mentioned earlier in Ben Gomez's talk. So these are all people who are using this collection of DSP chips to speed up their work. Krista mentioned the Connectionist network simulator. The AI people, the realization people, and campus folk all got together and dreamt this thing up. And of course, there was this paper design, maybe you could even say a paper mache design. I guess it was styrofoam. The large machine, but the real design was this T0 and the board, which was the SPERT board, and the multi-board later, which extended its life so that, as Krista said, in 2002 we were still using the thing. Like the RAP, the SPIRT was actually used for speech research. And I thought this was another unique feature of it, was not only was it a mechanism for sharing the research with, having the collaboration with others in the same research area, but it also wasn't just building a toy that demonstrated, oh, you could do such a thing, but people were really using it, and the research was really getting done much more effectively because they had this thing. There's the CNS research group. I won't go through and name everybody, but this included people from, as I said before, from campus and from ICSI, AI group, and the realization group. Oh, yes. An early picture. You have to sit through a few picnic pictures. Early. Oh, well, whatever. This is them with the torrent wafer. Brian Kingsbury, who was mentioned earlier, did a lot of the circuit design. And we figured, I guess we better have some software. There's Dave Johnson, who's our AV man today.
Well, we got it good, and we got it right, and we want to read it, and we got it on board. Why not it don't hurt, so it doesn't hurt. Gotta make that you're good at, you're good at this one task. You just make a trouble to make our effort last. Don't wanna lose our shirt, so we do the spurt.
Short instrumental section. Had to have 32-bit registers, Krista insisted, yeah.
You know, fast on the wire, okay, and those CPUs start to pick up sticks all along their dirt, put together first. We love the neural network, we love the lane of strong. We like to run them forward, we got that not too long. We like to keep them alert, so we build a spurt. Well, we got this dirt, and we got a rock roll. And we gotta read of it, and we gotta unload. Wanna cause that don't hurt, so we go to the spurt. Going out to sea.
Anyway. Okay, a little more silliness. Jeff Bilms was one of a number of very talented people in the group over the years. Excellent coder, excellent on theory, professional musician. He plays lots of instruments. Over the years, we seem to, for some reason, take a lot of pictures of him. Jeff Eats Watermelon 95, Jeff Eats Watermelon 96, 97. I ask everybody for pictures, and we end up with a gazillion pictures of Jeff eating watermelon. I don't know. This is not a homeless person. This is Nikki Mercafori, who is another key person in the group, and she actually came back and joined ICSI as a pro later on. Dan Ellis, we have a lot of pictures of people eating, but who is now a professor at Columbia. I didn't mention that Jeff Bilms is professor at University of Washington. Yes, Mike Shire is another student in the group, off at some meeting in Germany. Sure, very scholarly affair, probably Oktoberfest. And then Eric Fosselusha, who's a professor at Ohio State. This is just a picture of the realization group. Pretty much, actually, that's my son who's sneaked in there. But it was so it's the realization. The speech group now is actually a bit larger than this, but it's maybe 30–40% larger. That's kind of the group that we had towards the end of the 90s. And this is a congratulations cake we had for Sue Lynn, Krista, and Jeff, who are graduating at the same time. So let's see, what else do I have? Okay, so personal perspectives for the for this period. The era of dominant international funding was ending. As I said, this wonderful funding from Germany was coming to an end. So there was a real serious question of whether ICSI was a project or an institution. He certainly could have been looked at from the sponsor side that, you know, here's a 10-year project. And then at the end of that time, as Jerry was saying earlier, people are very good. You know, they've achieved a lot during their stay here, so then they can go get good jobs. But I was asked to run this thing, and, and I thought, well, maybe we should actually try to have it as an institution. But of course, then I had to actually look at the details. It wasn't looking so good. And so we did a bunch of running around. We had discussions with international sponsors to soften the change. We looked for new federal sources. We eliminated non-critical spending. There was some equipment purchases that had been ordered before anyone looked at the money to pay for them. And then there's Scott Schenker, who brought in this wonderful ICSI group and the funding to back it. As I recall from Scott saying this, and maybe Vern's here, maybe this will match your recollection as well, the issue was that there was interest in Stanford and interest in Berkeley. Certainly some of the people really were in Berkeley, so that was an advantage to Berkeley. But the other thing was that Stanford didn't have an ICSI, and Berkeley did. So the only constant is change. You know, you can't step in the same river twice, or some people would say you can't step in the same river once. After a few years of boom from the AT&T money and so on, the bust hit, industrial funding went down, researchers submitted lots of proposals, and many were successful. So by a couple years later, by 2003, the main support was from US federal grants. But the international program didn't go away. It just was at a lower level. And industry didn't go away, it was just at a lower level. So currently, the international program is starting to expand again, especially a significant expansion that just happened with Germany, which was spoken about earlier today. A few changes. The realization group became the speech group. Initially, the point of the realization group was, in fact, the full name that Jerry gave it when he hired me was the realization of massively parallel systems. And so the idea was these massively parallel systems, you know, how do we make them and so on. And I felt very strongly that there should be an application area. And since I had a background in speech, I said, let's try that. But over the years, the mix changed. Krista made reference to the change over time of what you could actually go out and buy. And so we shifted gradually away from building our systems and focusing on the application area itself. So starting, I think, about 10 years ago, we changed the name from realization to speech. Theory group became the algorithms group. Although there is work on fundamental core theory still, the emphasis in the group is much more algorithms for particular areas. The networking group under Ferrari became ICSI under Schenker, and then it became ICER, and lately I think it's mostly just called the networking group. And security, worms, etc., the kind of things that Vern was talking about earlier are now a greater chunk of it than they were earlier. AI applications, the name just changed to AI, but there's a larger emphasis on social applications. There's this new group, architecture, which is kind of realization redux, MIT emigre Krista. New group vision, very quickly ramping up, MIT emigre Trevor Darrow, sitting over there. So, current prospects. I don't even remember what I have here. Oh, yes. That's right. I was feeling pretty good when I did this. So I think things are looking pretty positive in terms of funding, in terms of quality of research, people. Feeling good about it. years ahead, keeping this going does require constant effort. It's not something that just falls off for us, but it can work as it has. And the key is continuing to have outstanding people as we have. It's, and I don't just mean the researchers. I also mean the staff. We have an outstanding staff, and whenever we have these exit pages where people talk about what they liked or disliked about their stay here, they say, oh yeah, of course, our group was the best, and so forth, our research group. But where they really go on is about the administrative help they achieved. And so, people like Dave Johnson here in sysadmin, Maria Quintana on the administrative side, Teresa Hilaire for finance, their teams are really just super. Anyway, I felt strongly enough. I felt this was deserving of another song. So. There's a place for us, ICSI, a place for us. The eyes handled with loving care, that's not found elsewhere. Now's a time for us, today a time for us, international research spot, heart of Berkeley, and yet it's not. ICSI, we'll always keep on inventing, long as the sponsors consenting. There's a place for us, a time and place for us. Place your bets on us if you dare. We'll charge overhead everywhere. ICSI. If there's anyone here who doesn't know the reference, check out West Side Story sometime. That's really it. I just wanted to acknowledge some people for preparing this thing. Jacob Volkenhauer, who works for Maria, did a lot of work on the audio and video for this. Dave Johnson did the whole setup for this, getting the other room together and the video streaming and so on. Maria Quintana actually had the song idea, and also just everything else out there that worked. Maria, the whole staff, admin, sysadmin, finance staff, were very hard work preparing for this week. Some of you may not realize this, but the annual ICSI board meeting was yesterday, which also entails lots and lots of preparation, and everybody worked very, very hard. The research staff, of course, for being at the very top of their game. I'm so proud to head up an institution like this with people like this. And ICSI's board and their sponsors, our sponsors, for their support. Thank you all very much.